Hello everyone, I have a wonderful new palette introduced to you. A collaboration between myself and between me and Deep Deep Light. My friends Agnes and Dana have created a beautiful palette with two new colors that we created together, and they allowed me to select the rest of the colors and put together this lovely palette, and it is called the Shibui Palette. So I want to tell you a little bit about Shibui first. It is a Japanese aesthetic. This palette does not represent necessarily the Japanese perspective at all on this Japanese aesthetic, quality of aesthetic, but it represents my sort of embodiment of it. It has been something I've studied as long as I've been drawing and painting. It is very, very important to my own aesthetic in my work. It's like, once I discovered it and started to research Shibui, it was a quality that I wanted to embody in my way of working. So it's sort of become the underlying philosophy of my own personal work and my own understanding of beauty as being something that is seen through the lens of everyday life. Everydayness is a great quality of the Shibui aesthetic. All right. It is very much about suggestion over statement. So it is not loud, it's quiet, it's subtle, it's suggestive, right? But it's very implicit at the same time, very purposeful. The more subtle the suggestion, the more tasteful the work of art is the way I see it personally. I mean, this is my personal aesthetic, right? I'm not saying that's the overarching truth in any way, shape, or form. It's my personal aesthetic. So as a nature, there is nothing overly ornate about something that embodies Shibui. Everything has a purpose, right? It's not ornamental, so to speak. So every element sort of quietly creates the structure of the whole. To me, Shibui is a whisper, right? It's an experience. There is this sense of a serene darkness, like a darkling serenity, like a restfulness and ease at its core. It's very peaceful and still. A lot of people, when they see my work in exhibition or in a gallery, or just when they see my work, one of the common things that I hear is that your work is so still and quiet. And that is on purpose. That is something that I want to embody in my work. All right. Not everyone does. And that's the beauty of it, right? We need things also that have more energy and vibrancy, and we need tropical colors too. But this is how I see it, right? It's very much an autumn, winter type of feeling to it. This is the perfect time of year to introduce a palette of Shibui inspired colors, because it has that more nuanced, muted, monochromatic feel to it, right? What else do I want to say about it? It's very quiet, it's very sober, right? Very refined and rough at the same time. So these colors are very refined and nuanced colors. There's nothing like clear and vibrant in it. They're all a little bit muted, a little bit grayed out, a little bit more winter and autumn, right? And yet at the same time, there's a lot of granulation in some of these colors, right? And they are meant to be mixed and paired in beautiful ways. These colors are very nuanced, like I said, and they can be further quieted with various shades of gray. And so in this palette, I'm going to show you the colors and swatch them in a moment. This is how the palette comes. You will find really four colors for muting. All right, so there's one called Tough, which is a beautiful volcanic ash pigment. It's like a muted taupey berry color. It's very, very beautiful, and it really brings a quietness to any color you mix it with, but also a texture, right? Then there is gray ochre, which is a beautiful mid-tone gray. There is bark, which is a very deep, cool brown that's almost black. And then there's Mars black, which is a highly granulating black. All right. So this palette, even though the colors are already soft and gentle, right, they also can be further muted, which is a very shibui thing. Most like shibui colors are grayed or silvered, and there's often a hint of sparkle, right? Just a hint. And the only color in this palette that has sparkle is this new color called Darkling, and it's a castle earth with a rich bronze mica that is not ostentatious or showy. It's very subtle and beautiful. Yeah, so you know, just a hint of sparkle. So it's very incandescent and also dusky at the same time, this palette. It is not affected by trends. This is not a trendy palette in any way. It's just sort of colors that would stand the test of time, right? And the more you use this palette and the more you experience it, the more it will reveal to you, for sure. These colors are just so nuanced, and you'll see with some of them, the more water you add, the more they release, and they dance and they change and they shift, and they're really very exquisite. Two new colors were created for this palette. One is Darkling, which is the Castle Earth with the bronze shimmer, and the other one is a very soulful, mystic green called Midori. And Midori is a mix of, I think, 4 or 5 different pigments with a beautiful sort of particles of darkness that flow within it as it washes out. It's quite special. These colors are meant to be lingered over, right? In quiet moments of everyday expressive play. They have a soothing, subtle harmony no matter how you will combine them, for sure. So what I want to do is unwrap these. I wanted to show them to you as they come. They're so beautiful. So I want to unwrap them, and then I want to swatch them individually so you can see the expression of each color on a page. And then I want to show you some beautiful mixes. I'm not going to unwrap this on camera because no one needs to watch me do that. But I will be back when they're unwrapped and we'll swatch them out. So these are unwrapped, so beautiful. And I put a drop of water on each of them. With any handmade watercolors, actually any watercolors at all, I always put a drop of water on them to wake them up. Okay, so let's see. I am going to swatch them this way. Actually, maybe this way. And tell you about the colors. So this color is gray ochre. It is a natural earth color. It has a transparency. It's a very silky color. It can go from very, very dark to a beautiful pearly, sort of silvery gray when you add a lot of water to it. This is a wonderful color to gray out other colors and add a little bit of texture. And of course, it's beautiful on its own. This is Tough. Tough is a magical pigment. It is created from volcanic ash. It's incredibly ancient. And again, a beautiful muted, sort of silvery mauve that can go mid-tone, not terribly dark, but it is absolutely gorgeous. It's the color I use the most when I'm painting fields with like yellow ochres and raw siennas and gold ochres to mute out the yellows to make shadows. It's a gorgeous combination with yellow to sort of mute it out. The next color is called Mint. There are 3 greens in this palette, and this one is a very silky, opaque, sort of a celadon green. It reminds me of the color of a lot of Japanese pottery glazes. And when you add a lot of water to it, it pushes the pigments around and you get like a milkiness, but also a beautiful sort of celadon transparency. This color is English Red. It's a very beautiful earth red. So this is what I consider the primary red in this palette. All right. And then next is Peach. Peach is a beautiful, milky, warm pink, borderline apricot. Same kind of qualities. It moves to a transparency, but it also has a milky opacity when it's stronger. This color is called Reed Buff. It is a beautiful, just buff color. Also has that milky opacity, but when you add a lot of water to it, you get a transparency and then these pushes of pigment. It's very warm. Looks beautiful with grays. This is Raw Sienna, which is an incredibly useful color for fields and just about anything really. But one thing I just adore about Raw Sienna is that it mixes with blue to make the most gorgeous, gorgeous shades. This is Burnt Sienna. The Burnt Sienna is very special in this palette. It is a warmer Burnt Sienna, more on the orange side. And makes beautiful grays when mixed with the indigo. Next is Darkling. And Darkling is very special. You can see that you get a very transparent, like neutral brown. It's not really warm, it's not really cool. And then the bronze shimmer collects and you get this, I mean, just intense, beautiful, sort of deep glimmer. It doesn't stand out. It's just like embedded in the color. It is how I love shimmer the most. And it just adds just that little bit of darkling serenity to any kind of painting. And I, if you know my work, you know I use sparkle in everything. The next is Green Earth. This color is a very, very gentle, natural green. I chose 3 greens, and this is one of my favorite greens in the whole world. It has a transparency to it. It's very, very delicate and warm. And I don't know, it's like jade. If you ever had a jade bracelet or a jade ring, it reminds me of jade, and it's just such a quiet, quiet, beautiful green. Now the next color is Midori, and this is a color that we made together along with Darkling here. And I want to, it was such a fun process. We created it together. They were, Agnes and Dana were creating it and mulling it as we were speaking on Zoom, so I was present for it. And we got to add a little bit of this, add a little bit of that, until we came up with this color. To me, this is my soul color. It is so incredibly beautiful. And it can go from very, very dark, right, in places, to incredibly pale and luminous, and it shifts from warm to cool. When you flood it with water, you'll start to see this sort of golden halo come through. And then you'll notice all these tiny little dark particles that sort of float around and settle. It is the most beautiful green. It is like my soul color. It's a mystic green. It's beautiful. Next is blueberry, and blueberry is a really beautiful sort of Nordic gray blue. It's for those of us who are not really bright blue fans. We like our blues a little bit steely and gray. This is a very strong pigment. It can go from really pale and silvery blue to very sort of mid-tone and opaque blue. It's just, I don't know, it's like, I love this color. It's a very special blue, and I love it in skies. Then we have French indigo. This is genuine indigo, which is very special in itself. And it has a quality that's sort of both warm and cool. It's a little bit on the warmer side, but when you start to drop in water into it, it really starts to shift and change. It can go from very, very dark to a very, very pale, powdery blue, which I love. It's very, very different from the blueberry, all right? And you'll see when I make some mixes, it makes a beautiful series of grays when you add some of the warmer hues to it. Then, we have bark. And bark is like this delicious, deep black brown. It's not black, it's not brown. It's just so gorgeous, and it also shifts into different colors and different bits of granulation. It's incredibly beautiful. It is one of my very favorite browns of all time. When they came out with this color, I was just completely smitten by it. That is bark. And then last is Mars Black. And Mars Black is a very special black because you can put a lot of water into it and get these sort of cool textured grays, like silver colors with beautiful texture in them. It can also be pure black, but the magic of Mars Black is the granulation. And when you add it to anything, right, it gives whatever you add it to that quality. And so some super magical effects happen when you use Mars Black. And I'll show you when we do the mixes. For instance, when you mix it with English Red, you'll see it's very, very special. So I'm going to let these dry and take this piece of paper off and get myself a mixing palette. And then I'm going to show you some beautiful mixes with this palette. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you are the two primary systems, all right, within this palette. So there's a pastel primary system, and that is peach. Okay. And reed buff. And you can go darker with these also. And mint. Okay, so within these, you can mix them, all right? So for instance, with peach and reed buff, you get another beautiful tone, all right? With mint and reed buff, you get this gorgeous sort of pearly gray-green. And then with mint and peach, it's like a lavender gray. Get a little bit more. So this is a warmer gray green, a more violet gray, and then a beautiful sort of shimmering peachy emulsion. So just absolutely stunning, beautiful pastels that you have at your fingertips. For me as an artist, I use these a lot in skies. These are my cloud colors, right? And sometimes my entire sky. As a painter of, I paint a lot of pottery vessels, like Japanese pottery, and the glazes contain a lot of these opaque colors that sort of drip down from the lip, that kind of thing. I also use it a lot, pastels a lot in abstract work. All right, so they're just super beautiful to have on the palette. And I'll tell you, a lot of watercolorists have this sort of unspoken theme that they don't use white. Well, someone once tried to tell me that, but I knew better because I studied Turner and Ruskin and all of those glorious sublime painters, watercolor painters, and they used white in everything. Body color is throughout their paintings. So these kinds of colors are super useful for any kind of painting that you do, and they just make things very special. So the other primary system is English red. All right. Raw sienna. And so you're getting these very earthy, muted, natural, all right, natural qualities. And indigo. So these are not going to make vibrant mixes. You can never mix colors more vibrant. You can only go more muted, right? So let me just show you the mix between English red and raw sienna. Okay, so a very muted, sort of like Luberon orange. Then we have English red and indigo. Where's my... Put it right here. So you've got this sort of violet, brown violet, like a violet earth. Okay. Then indigo and raw sienna. Raw sienna does not act like a normal yellow. All right. So you're going to get very muted, silvery greens. Oh, wrong one. Right, so that is the basic primary system that I wanted to work with this palette. Everything is hushed and nuanced and muted and quiet. It's like a palette of winter and a palette of November. Okay? All right, so let's look at some of the other mixes that I love. Any color in this palette. All right, so let's say, let's just use English red. Putting it over here on my palette. And I can put gray in it. So I'm going to put a little bit of gray ochre. And it is going to mute out my English red to a more nuanced color. all right? I have a lot of water in these paints right now, so things are going to be more on the light, but this can go much darker as well. Like I could take some of the gray ochre and then it becomes more brick, all right? The other thing, you can mix any of these grays or darks with the brighter colors, any of the colors. If I use Mars Black, okay, so here we have, put a little bit more English red in there because I want you to see this beautiful kind of maroony brown, but it's going to have incredible granulation properties. All right, and it's going to shift and change, and the red will separate from the black and give you incredible textures. When you drop water into mixes like this, you see this white threading happening? It's going to really push the pigments apart, and you'll get a separation of the two because they weigh differently, right? And so you get these incredibly nuanced colors that have all sorts of special effects locked in them. And you just have to unlock them with water. Another really beautiful mix is burnt sienna and indigo. And you get this sort of transparent, luminous gray that can go to brown if you add more burnt sienna into it. That will have gorgeous granulation. So it's your typical, like these grays, when you mix indigo with burnt sienna, you get this transparency, right? When you go to like English red, you get more of an opacity. So as you play with these, you'll see like which ones are more transparent, which ones are more opaque. Also, something like Midori, all right, I'll probably get you a new piece of paper here in a second. Midori and bark. It's going to go very, very dark, all right? So you can go super dark with it, or you can start to put water into it and you get these beautiful olive greens, all right? That will also shift and separate into different colors with the addition of water. One thing you'll notice with handmade paints is that they love water. These paints love water. Water unlocks the special qualities of handmade paints because a lot of times they're made with very special pigments in different combinations, and the pigments will do different things when they're in water, right? So they start to lift and separate and shift, and you get 3 colors instead of 2 colors. I mean, it's sort of magical. I also love to mix Midori with Darkling. And you get a little bit more muted green, but when it does all the shifting and separating, it will have a hint of bronze sparkle. You can add a little bit of indigo to this also, and it just becomes magnificent when it dances around on the paper. Let me show you raw sienna. And tough. So what tough does is it gives you a shadowy tone for your raw sienna kind of colors. But again, with loads of texture, right? Bent grass, or I'm sorry, reed buff, not bent grass. That's reed buff. And tough. These beautiful colors that can be used in field shadows from light to dark, right? and just beautiful colors. One thing I really love to do with a palette like this is pair colors together. So I can pick any of them. Let's say if I'm doing a more abstract work, sometimes I just like to stick to 2 or 3 colors. And I like to choose things that are very, sort of harmonious, but different, right? That are surprising. So I could do something like a green earth next to tough, right? And then add a darker color. This is light and mid-tone. And then perhaps add a bark to that. And I have a really beautiful color palette that can be mixed, right, to create all sorts of different hues with a lot of harmony for a more abstract work that you could do some mark making with, things like that. The green earth and the tough are also truly beautiful together. I'm running out of room here. You also don't have to really mix them. You can just drop them in together and let them mix on the paper, and you get even more interesting results. So I did a whole series of gemstone paintings where the paintings actually look like gemstones, and that's how I did it. I just took beautiful pigments like this and dropped them in one on top of the other, and they start to mix and mingle on the page, and you get little hints of one and little hints of the other, right? So you can see that the more you mix these, the more nuanced they become, all right? And it's a funny thing because this palette actually makes really beautiful landscapes, really unusual, right? I've used it mostly for landscapes and for abstract work and when I paint pottery. So I love to paint pottery vessels. And that's the majority of the work I've used this with. I think it would also be a really, really beautiful portrait palette because you have things like English red, which can be masked out to be beautiful lighter skin tones. And then you can add in things like the reed buff. And then you could use more like the burnt sienna and add in something like the green earth to get more mid-range, beautiful luminous skin tones. And then you could use also Venetian red, I'm sorry, not Venetian red, English red, with something like a touch of bark. And you can get beautiful darker skin tones. You could also add a touch of green earth to this as well. And you could go quite a bit darker even. So that beautiful red and that brown with a touch of green can give you all sorts of possibilities. So I could see this being a really beautiful portrait palette. You've got indigo that you could mute and change for blue eyes. You've got plenty of options for green eyes, brown eyes, hazel eyes, and plenty of options for hair. So I think it would be a really, really fascinating portrait palette as well. I'm not a portrait painter, but I know how to make the colors, and this palette would do a great job. It's a really wonderful mix between transparency and opacity as well. And even the most opaque of the colors, for instance, blueberry, when added to a lot, when you add a lot of water to it, because it's so concentrated, you can get beautiful, more transparent looking colors, right? I could see adding a touch of the green earth to this for a beautiful sky, or Midori even. A beautiful like November sky. And then if you wanted a more blue sky, right, you can always go into indigo, because indigo is a gorgeous sky color, and you can lighten that up with things like green earth and mint, right? So this is not your average mixing palette. It is not going to give you a means to mix colors exactly. This is a tonalist palette. It is a nuanced color palette. It has a very atmospheric feel to it. It's just different. It's quiet. It's hushed, right? So that is the Shibui palette. I am thrilled. I am so honored to have been able to make this collaboration, and it is a real thrill for me to have this palette to use in my own work after helping to create it. So if you are interested in this palette, if you are my patron, my patron on Patreon, you get a special discount, which I will share with this video. And then if you are here on YouTube, you also get a discount, a 5% discount, which I will put the code in the description box. And also the link to this palette will be in the description box. The palette is already available on the website. I also have another palette with deep, deep light called the Flower Moon palette. I also made a video about that, so you can check that out as well. These are incredible paints, and they have such beautiful energy, and the quality is just outstanding. And my friends are very special human beings too. So it is a delight for me to be in collaboration with Deep, Deep Light. All right, everybody, thank you so much. And I am going to be doing a demonstration on Instagram, making a tiny landscape with these paints. I actually might even film it separately, and maybe I'll just upload it to YouTube and share it that way, because you get better light that way. It's hard to see on those Instagram videos because they're so squished. So maybe I'll do that, and I'll upload it separately as a demonstration on YouTube and then just share it to Instagram. So I'm going to do that tomorrow. I don't have time today, but I'll do it tomorrow so you can see it in action. All right, everyone, thank you so much, and I will see you again very soon. Take care.